Alright, so the next couple things you're going to need is B1 and the B1 bag underneath it. I'm going to put that towards the side I'm going to install it on. B2 and the B2 bag that goes with that. Put that on the side that we're going to install it on, which is back here. Let me zoom out a little bit. Actually, that's perfect right there like that. And then you're going to need your bed. So you're going to need 2 zip ties and a belt. So here we go. So this is the one that goes on the front side, and I'm kind of disappointed that this isn't recessed a little bit like the other ones were, because now it's not going to sit as flush, but we'll just go ahead and install it anyway. Alright, so we're going to start with the top 2, because this is actually elevated, so it makes the printer sit off the ground a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and install that side here, and since we can't really square it up to the bottom this time, I'm going to just make sure that these are square side to side. So we're adding the 4 M5 by 20 screws. Okay, so we're just snugging those up. You don't want them too snug though, because then you can't, if it's not aligned properly, you can't get the bottom bolts. So actually there's one bolt that's a little bit longer. It's actually a 25 screw, so you'll be able to know which one that is. Keep that one aside. That one's going to be used for the pulley. Okay, so we're going to tighten these. So tighten those nice and snug. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the pulley to our M by 25, the brass spacer, the nut, and then we're going to add this in here to the front hole. So get it nice and snug, but just enough to that this pulley actually still moves. It seems a little rough, so I'm going to add some silicone to it. So I just added some silicone to basically where every piece of metal is touching each other. Okay, so the reason why they do this nut is because this washer doesn't sit on the inside of the actual pulley bearing. So you want to get it as close as you can to where it spins freely, but not where you tighten it so much that it doesn't spin. So just get it close, and then you can tighten it down, and that nut's actually going to act as a stop for the pulley, so that way you can tighten that down while having it super sturdy. So go ahead and lock that in. That thing is spinning like crazy because of the silicone now. I like it. It spins a long time. Next step, you're going to slide your bed on. Okay, so I don't think it matters which way, just as long as it's on there. That does not move at all. I love it. But actually, one thing I think I'm going to do first is attach the belt with a zip tie on one side, because I hear it's really difficult to get the belt attached after the fact. So we're going to just attach it through here. We're going to add 1 zip tie like so. You can add more if you want, but I'm not sure you'll need it. So I probably would, since these are really thin, but I'm going to try and build this as stock as I can. Then I'll upgrade anything else I need to on my own time. Okay, now I got to cut this off with something. I'll use a knife. Perfect. So now I've just routed the belt around the pulley with the teeth facing in, and then kind of set this to the back, because we are going to have to adjust this really tightly later on. So I'm just going to leave it like that until we get the other bracket put on. So let's flip this around. We're going to get this belt out of the way. That way it's not going to get squished by B2. Okay, so here's the B2. I did have an extra metal spacer and the nut. I'm not sure where that goes, so I'm just going to throw that back into B1 so we know where they're at. Alright, so now we're going to add the other side of the bracket. Make sure it's nice and square. So we're going to put all these on, finger tight. So I'm just going to snug it to where this corner here is perfectly flush with both sides of the aluminum extrude. Most likely it'll line up because these bolts go directly into the center of those tapped extrude pieces. So now that that part's flush, we'll just go ahead and tighten all the rest of them. I'm going to show you how to adjust that belt here in a second. Alright, so the next thing you're going to need is actually the B13 bracket, the B16 bracket, the hardware that comes under the B13 bracket. So move that bag aside. A stepper motor. This came in the actual hardware too. And then I'm actually adding some washers, because this is some acrylic stuff, and you don't want these bolts to get wedged in between these holes as you're tightening them, because then you can crack them and you can break them. So what I'm using is I believe these are M6s for the smaller bolts. Okay, so I have 3 of those. This is just stuff that I added myself. You can get these in the washers anywhere. They're at Home Depot for like literally $1.10 or something each. And then for the bigger ones, the actual the M4 by 12s, I'm using number 8s, I believe. And what this is going to do is just going to disperse the pressure over a bigger area of the acrylic, and it'll prevent some cracking and all that kind of stuff, micro cracks, so they don't bust them later on. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to have to try and figure out how I want these wires to run. And I think mine are going to be running to the left this way, because that's going to be my front. I'm going to have my board on this side, so I'm going to run this to the back here so I can actually run it through the side of the extrude. So what I'm going to do with that means I'm going to mount it like this. Okay, the top, the actual shaft facing down with the wire going towards the back. This actually gets mounted to this, so we're going to set it like this, just as if it was going to be mounted. Flip it over, and then we're going to add those bolts. So remember, for each bolt, using an M6 washer. I think these are actually M3, so you could find an M3 washer. M6s work just as fine. So we're going to add those, and then we're going to crank her down. Perfect. So I'm just doing the usual, getting them nice and finger tight. And you can see how thin these are. These washers are extremely thin, so it's not gonna do too much to the height of your nut or anything at all, so it should still fit perfectly. I'll show you right now what I mean. These are the correct Allen wrench. I don't think that's the correct Allen wrench. This one is. So if you can see how thin that washer is. So it's hardly even noticeable, but it's gonna save your acrylic from destruction. Always worth having. So as you can see, or if you can hear, or if you can't hear, these washers are actually preventing the acrylic from squealing when you tighten it, which is a sure sign that there's some fracturing going on, some micro fractures or something. Even tightening them really tight, I'm not getting that sound, and that's always good. It's always good to put these washers on anything that you're using acrylic. That'll prevent your thing from cracking. Eventually, hopefully, we'll be able to make these in metal, and then we can get rid of these acrylic ones. So the next step here is we're going to add the M4x12s through, but make sure you have that washer. I think that's a number 8 if I remember, and you're going to put them through. And if you're wondering why mine are black and yours are brown, it's because I've already taken off these brown covers off the acrylic, which are a huge pain, but you need them. So hopefully the washer won't affect this part too much, because I do notice that it's giving me hardly anything to bite with, but we'll see how well it works here in a second, because I for sure want them on there anyway. So let's see if I can get this in here and get it to lock without having any problems. Not sure this is going to work. These bolts are a little bit too short if you want to use them with washers. So I'm going to see if it'll grab without the washer. I'm thinking these are just too short. So I'm going to take a different approach since it's not fitting. I really want these washers in there, so I'm going to get this in without that front bracket on first, just so we can actually get these in with the washers on. Nice. Worked like a charm. Okay, so this side, don't have sideways. Perfect. So, I'm going to snug these in just so the T-nuts stay. Okay, and then reattach this bracket here. Whew. Good to go. Okay, so I want to measure out how far this pulley is center from the top of here, so that way I can actually match this piece onto the stepper motor, about how far deep I need to get it down on there. So, okay, so I'm actually going to, it's about half-inch mark, so that means I would have to bring this down to, or bring this up to half-inch. Okay, so in this part I have to measure half-inch from the bottom of the actual gear where the lip is, where the teeth are, to the very top of this extrude. So if we get that adjustment right, belt will be perfectly horizontal. Yep, it's pretty much dead on. I just have to shift it down a tiny bit. So I'm going to loosen this, just barely bump it up, and then we're going to be set to go. Cool. So I am happy with that adjustment. I put one of the first set screws on the flat section of the shaft there. Tighten that one really good. And then on the side here, just tighten that secondary set screw. Now we can finally mount this beast. Sweet. Okay, so I've remounted this to the back end. I'm not going to put this part on just yet because I do need to set the belt. So I'm going to make sure the belt is sitting on the other side, the pulley over there. I'm going to push this one through. Okay, we're going to go around the gears this time. So what I'm trying to do now is I've gotten the belt attached on one side, went around the idler pulley, came back around, got onto the stepper gear pulley, and I'm trying to find out exactly where the adjustment for the belt is, or actually the zip tie mount for the belt is underneath the bed. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to mark it, and then I'm going to attach it a little bit just behind that, because what we can do here with this is we can adjust this backwards and tighten the belt fully after we've gotten this to fit snug at its most forward position here. So I'm going to measure down in here to find out where that belt loop lock part is, and then I can remove everything, tie the belt to it at that adjustment, unscrew these, get the belt on there nice and snug, and then from there we can basically micro adjust these and pull this back until it's really nice and tight. Alright, so now that I got the belt marked, I know exactly how big to make my loop. So what I have to do in order to get the bed off is take off one of these ends, and I don't want to adjust my stepper motor because I got that one. That one's a lot harder to get on because those T-nuts have to sit perfect unless you ended up replacing it with the different bolts, and you don't have that problem. But for me, I didn't, so I have to take this part off, take my bed off, and then mount my belt, do my mark on the other side of underneath the bed, and then we should be good to go. Actually, I just remembered that you don't have to take it off. You can actually also adjust the eccentric nuts to the loosest position, and you should be able to pull the bed off. But if you can't, this is your next best bet. All right, now we can roll this beast off, make a loop, and we're gonna make this very, very easy. There's our mark that we made, so we're going to create this loop up to the point of that mark. Okay, I just went a little bit past that loop because we're gonna have plenty of adjustment, don't worry about that. And then now we can finally use our second zip tie. So now we got our belt marked, we've created our loop. Okay, and now we have the correct size loop that we need. Cut off this other section here. And now one thing I forgot to do is I'm gonna adjust my eccentric nuts before I attach the plate back on. So we'll throw the belt inside there. Okay, we'll add the wheels back on. I'm going to adjust my eccentric nuts on the bottom so that it tightens perfect. I'm going to reattach this bracket and the belt around that loop. So boom, there's the first one. Pull this side of the loop back that way, and we'll retighten this on. Okay, we're all mounted here. Pull my loop, go back this way. Now we're going to add the belt loop to the other side here, the stepper motor side. So what I'm going to do now is loosen this. So now I'm removing this plate again so I can actually adjust that stepper motor. So now I'm going to move the belt down. So when I move this forward, so I'm going to start with one side so I can get that T-nut back flush. Okay, and then this one, we're also going to do the same thing and make sure that T-nut is sideways inside there. Okay, got him flush again. Alright, now we're retightening the end on, and then that's pretty much that. That part took a little while because you got to make sure this belt's really tight. It kind of rings when you mess with it. And there you go. So now we're going to work on attaching the sides.